This video is brought to you by Eureka Ergonomics' new Aero standing desk, which Eureka kindly sent to my editor Austin, because editors deserve love too, damn it. Get 10% off your purchase with offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Click the link below to check it out right now, or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Oh man, I'm really bummed about this one, holy shit. All week I've been playing Wild Hearts, the new Monster Hunter-esque game from Koei Tecmo. Now let me tell you, I went into this with very low expectations, not in the sense that I expected it to be shit, but rather I just expected it to be nowhere as good as Monster Hunter. The reason for that is that you can't think of Monster Hunter World or Monster Hunter Rise as individual games. You have to think of them as the culmination of nearly 2 decades worth of games. There have been 24 separate Monster Hunter games released to this point. Obviously, most of those are upgraded editions of mainline entries, but even those Ultimate Editions all added their own thing to what has largely been an unchanging core gameplay loop. Capcom have spent 19 years hammering this series like a swordsmith hammers a katana, folding the steel back on itself over and over again to create something that is almost perfect. So when I say that I had low expectations for Wild Hearts, what I mean to say is that this is a brand new IP, so what chance could it have of competing with Monster Hunter's 2 decades of refinement? Admittedly, the studio behind it, Omega Force, do have some form to look to, namely 2013's Suikoden and the 2016 sequel Suikoden 2, but it really says something that their next Monster Hunter style game is a totally new swing at things, as obviously Suikoden didn't get the critical or commercial success the studio had hoped for. But even with that form, I still thought to myself, there's no way this is gonna come close to Monster Hunter. The best I was hoping for was a competent monster hunting game that brought some new ideas to the table, enough that it grabbed a little bit of market share, convinced Andy Wilson to greenlight a sequel, and hopefully this franchise could begin that process of refinement the same way that Monster Hunter did. But boy, did Wild Hearts smash those expectations. This is a great fucking video game, no two ways about it. I definitely don't think it's better than Monster Hunter World, or Rise for that matter, but I think it's in the same weight category. It's got so much going for it that I am low-key blown away that Omega Force managed to stand all of this up in one go. So much innovation baked into the core gameplay loop of the monster hunting formula. Innovation that makes things faster, more immediate, and more arcadey, while also making it deeper, more strategic, and more demanding. That is a very clever trick to have pulled off, for real, and it's just one of the many things that have impressed me about this title. But holy hell does it run like shit! This is the worst PC port I've seen since Calisto Protocol pre-patch. It's not a total catastrophe, it works, it doesn't crash, but it just runs like ass, and it looks ugly while it's doing it. Sadly, we're very used to bad PC ports. It's kind of just the standard default setting for most PC ports these days, and when something comes out and it works well, we're like, hey, functional PC port, what's up? But even with these basement level expectations, the Wild Hearts PC port manages to find new disappointing lows. It's so bad that I cannot in good conscience recommend this product right now. I desperately want to, because I actually love this, and I hope that one day I will be able to recommend it to you, but I have to review the game in front of me, and right now it's just too shoddy to justify your time or money. But look, stay a while and listen. This is a really interesting game that I'm keen to talk about. I love so much of what it's doing, so let me tell you why I absolutely would have recommended Wild Hearts if it worked.
Let's make a move.
Before we talk about the good stuff though, let's get the bad stuff out the way. Performance. I tested Wild Hearts on 2 PCs. I spent most of my time on the RTX 2080 Ti, AMD Ryzen 3700X. All of the footage you will see in this video is from that machine, except for the part where I'm talking about my time on the RTX 4090 AMD Ryzen 5950X. I was unable to test this on Steam as the code I was provided was for EA Origin, not Steam. But yeah, I can't even get this to run properly on my desktop computers, so I don't have much hope for this running on the humble Steam Deck. We'll do the RTX 2080 Ti first. This is a 1440p machine, generally speaking, especially for a game that looks like this, because Wild Hearts ain't no oil painting. Point we'll come back to later. I did try 4K on this machine. I knew it would be a waste of time, and it certainly was. It was like 20 frames a second or something, unplayable. I then tried what I would have expected to work, 1440p max settings. So to really explain how performance works in this game, we kind of need to talk about the different scenarios you'll find yourself in. One of those scenarios is solo play, out in a big field without a lot of geometry going on. In those instances, 1440p max settings kind of works. I couldn't hit a reliable 60 FPS, but I could get close to it-ish. I would definitely dip, but it was fine enough, and I actually spent the opening part of my playthrough at these settings because, yeah, I was playing solo, and the map design was pretty basic at the start. The next condition you'll find yourself in is co-op. At this point, things start to break down, and they do so for a very specific reason. Wild Hearts is all about building these wooden contraptions anywhere and everywhere. They are constantly being built and smashed to pieces by the monsters, and when there's 3 people not only fighting, but also going full Fortnite on the landscape, performance dives big time. Sub 30 FPS at 1440p on the reg, and a very sluggish feel to the gameplay in a game where quick response time really matters. So when I started doing co-op more regularly, I had to drop down to 1080p medium settings, and let me tell you, it didn't really help. That resolution drop made almost no difference to my frame rate flaw or how sluggish it felt. I'd later learned that developers had discovered some sort of CPU related bottleneck which they're promising to fix soon. But yeah, that's one hell of a bottleneck, and I'd be surprised if their fix was the 180-degree turnaround that this game's performance desperately needs. The third scenario that you'll find yourself in is the 4th map zone, which is an ancient Japanese temple, and the surrounding landscape is covered in snow. Now, not only does this section run terribly, but it looks like shit. There's this ghetto blizzard effect that's been applied, and it looks as bad as the rain from the GTA remasters. For real, it's awful. It's so bad that it makes me not want to look at the game. And I'm not a graphics snob, mind you. I generally don't care about graphics, but this visual effect is so ugly that it's distracting, and the huge amounts of geometry associated with this temple make this whole zone borderline unplayable when you're running co-op. There is an upscaler in the menu. It's not DLSS and it's not FSR. I don't know what this upscaler is, but whatever it is, it's the worst. Not only does it not do much to improve frame rates, but it also degrades the image quality so much. I turned it on and immediately had to turn it off because of how bad everything looked. Oh, and by the way, if you want to change any of the major graphical settings, you need to return to the title screen to do that. So yeah, have fun trying to find the optimal settings that work for you. Just quickly on the RTX 4090 machine, I found it to be a similarly bad news story. At 4K max settings, this is gonna sit at around 70 FPS, but it's very choppy and it fluctuates a lot. You can see the FPS in the corner of this video. It's definitely more than playable, sure, but this is like a $1,600 GPU. Fewer than 0.25% of consumers have this GPU, according to Steam's January 2023 hardware survey. So not being able to hit a reliable frame rate on that card for a game that doesn't even look that great, that's a problem. That brings us to the monster in the room. The game just doesn't look too crash hot. Now that isn't always true, mind you. I happen to think that some of the monster designs and some of the locations are truly stunning, but that's really carried by art design more than it is graphical fidelity. To be honest, I just think Wild Hearts looks kinda dated, and I'll remind you that this is a current gen only title. It's not coming to PS4 or Xbox One, so it did need to be squeezed onto that aging hardware. They've made a game that looks and runs worse than Monster Hunter World, a game built for last gen consoles. Hell, it often looks worse than Monster Hunter Rise, a game that was first developed for the Nintendo Switch, and the potato that Gladys got plugged into is more powerful than the Nintendo Switch. I actually do understand why this game isn't pushing any graphical boundaries though, since its dynamic build system and its ambitious level design are going to require a lot of GPU and CPU throughput, but for it to run this badly while also not looking great, it's a real body blow. The beauty of all this on-the-fly building is how quick it can make combat feel, or how quickly you can build some defensive structures to leap out of the path of a charging monster. But so much of that intended impact is lost when the game is running at like 20 FPS. It's such a shame because this game is packed full of really interesting ideas and mechanics, and most of them are mortally wounded by this horrendous PC performance. And console people, bad news, it's pretty much the same for you guys as well, only it apparently looks worse as text to detail has been turned right down. I also hear the Xbox Series S version in particular is a real mess. Very sad times for an otherwise very promising title. So that's the performance block. TLDR, it really sucks. Basically everything else though, it kind of rules. And if this ever gets fixed, I can see myself playing a hell of a lot more of this. So I'm going to make a lot of Monster Hunter comparisons in this video. Forgive me for doing that, but I think it's just useful because obviously Monster Hunter is so potent in our minds when we think about these sorts of games. To answer the obvious question, yes, Wild Hearts is very Monster Hunter. Anyone who's played Monster Hunter is going to immediately recognize about 70% of what's going on here. since a lot of it is lifted and dropped from Capcom's seminal series. In particular, the overall structure of the experience is very similar, with a limited number of maps housing roaming monsters, a campaign with a threadbare story forcing you to hunt specific monsters, a weapon tree and armor sets requiring you to kill monsters for components, and even those big dumb goofy boss encounter missions which are meant to change things up but really just make you wish you were fighting regular old monsters instead. I'm actually fine with Omega Force copying and pasting so much of the core experience because I do think they've added enough on top of that to justify the existence of Wild Hearts. More on that soon. But I will say that the art direction side of things is a letdown because it is so Monster Hunter. It's good art direction, don't get me wrong. As I've said earlier, so many of the monsters, locations, weapons, and armor look fantastic. But if you put Wild Hearts side by side with Monster Hunter and showed it to your average non-gamer civilian, it's gonna be like that office picture meme thing, like they're the same. It really feels like a wasted opportunity. I mean, think of where you could go with the Monster Hunter formula. Imagine steampunk Monster Hunter. Imagine gothic Monster Hunter. Imagine lo-fi sci-fi Monster Hunter. I don't know, you could go a lot of places, and Omega Force just went to the one that we've been seeing for the past 20 years. That's a bummer, but hey, maybe the Horizon Zero Dawn multiplayer game will deliver us a new visual style where Omega Force couldn't. Okay, so back to the comparisons. I think the second question that most people are going to have about this game is, does it fix this thing about Monster Hunter that I don't like? Most notable complaints about Monster Hunter include stuff like the pace of animations and animation locking, camera, how easy it is to play multiplayer, and the grind. I'm going to say that Wild Hearts does make some important interventions into most of these things, but broadly speaking, this is still very much a Monster Hunter game. Its combat is faster than Monster Hunter, but it's definitely not Devil May Cry levels of speed and responsiveness. It's definitely playable solo, but it's much easier when you're playing co-op. It's still very grindy. In fact, I'd go as far as to say it's maybe more grindy than Monster Hunter. Long story short, if you didn't like Monster Hunter, it's unlikely that you are going to enjoy Wild Hearts. It's not a response to Monster Hunter, it's an evolution of some of its core aspects, and a very successful one at that. The core combat of Wild Hearts is a good example of what I'm talking about. There are 8 weapons to choose from, some of them are locked until later in the campaign. There's your standard longsword, your greatsword, your mallet, etc. On top of that though, there are entirely new weapon categories, like this serrated umbrella thing, which is all about parrying enemy attacks, or the claw blade, which is all about aerial acrobatics as you use the claw as an anchor point, zipping about your target in a way that Kinsect mains would only dream about. So these weapons are a mixture of the familiar and the innovative, and if you go into this wanting to try out some completely new weapon designs wholly distinct from Monster Hunter, then yeah, Wild Hearts is going to deliver. The rhythm of combat is familiar, but different. Many people would describe Monster Hunter's combat as clunky. That's probably not the right phrase to use, but I get where these people are coming from. Monster Hunter has a big focus on weapon sheathing, animation locking, long charge times for big swings, and unpaired animations that force you to position in a very specific way to hit your target. It's very good when you get the hang of it, but it's hard, and it can definitely serve as a barrier to entry for those who don't click with it. Wild Hearts' combat is definitely more accessible. Broadly speaking, your character moves faster, they dodge and slide further, animations are quicker, and there's more animation cancelling options. Plus, the build stuff gives you a huge amount of freedom to dodge, jump, or seek cover in a variety of ways. Combos are also simpler. Getting to grips with any weapon in Monster Hunter takes capital T time. They are each so deep, so much to learn and master, it's a proper thing. Here in Wild Hearts, there's really only a few combos per weapon and they're really easy to execute, and mastering the basics of a new weapon is a very quick affair. That's not to say that Wild Hearts' combat isn't deep, because it absolutely is, but the game relies a lot on its building stuff to make combat deep and strategic, whereas Monster Hunter, all of that had to happen through the weapons alone. Separate from the building stuff, I just really enjoy the core combat of Wild Hearts. I spent most of my time with the longsword and the bow. The longsword is so much fun because it has these big, easy to execute combos that feel really satisfying, and there's a bunch of moves in there that dash you forward so you're extremely mobile. When the blade is charged, you can unleash it and it becomes this whip thing, and it absolutely shreds if you can get the right combo going. And if you can drop from a 3-stack build tower and hit your target, you will deliver one of the most devastating moves in the entire game. The bow is equally fun, but in a totally different way. It's sort of built around filling your target with shitty little arrows and then detonating them with a big arrow. It's tricky, to be honest. It's a hard weapon to use when you're solo, but if you're in a group and you can just stand back and do your thing while your buddies tank aggro, the bow absolutely shreds, and it is easily one of the strongest weapons in the entire game. The tentpole feature of Wild Hearts, the thing that really makes it crackle and pop, is its dynamic building system known as Karakori. Karakori is a Japanese word that refers to simple mechanized contraptions. Here in Wild Hearts, these contraptions form the foundation for almost every aspect of the game. Take the story for example. As a hunter, you come to be mysteriously connected to this ancient Karakori magic that has been lost to time. You alone now possess this ability to build these wooden structures, giving you the edge you need to face off against the kimono, fearsome monsters who roam the landscape, wreaking havoc on nearby villages. The story is not great, kind of skippable to be honest, but it definitely involves hunting a lot of kimono, and tangentially it's related to the Karakori, since the city used to be protected by this ancient Karakori power, but those devices have since fallen silent. You need to reawaken that Karakori magic by defeating enough monsters, thereby giving the city the chance to defend itself. So that's Karakori's presence in the story. What about exploration? Well, this is where it starts to get really fun. So one of the best things that Wild Hearts does is it massively evolves our relationship with space in the Monster Hunter genre. Typically, landscapes in Monster Hunter games are quite static. They're arenas connected by thoroughfares, there's one or two camps you can discover, that's about it. Here in Wild Hearts, it's best to think of each landscape as a construction zone, and it's up to you to conquer that landscape through strategic placement of Karakori, making traversing that landscape faster and easier. It starts with camp construction. You build your own camps in this game. Camps plural. You can choose where to put your respawn tent, your workbench, your food rack, your decorations. You are limited by a power budget for the zone, so you can't go too crazy. Being able to build multiple camps in each zone and design how each of them look and which services they provide is hella cool. Absolutely love it. But what about getting around? Well, if you've played Death Stranding, you're already partly across how this works. You will build zip lines and air chutes that let you move up, down, and across huge distances in the flash of an eye. This stuff persists in between sessions, mind you, so the map you're carving up is permanently carved up. Hell, if monsters happen to destroy this stuff during battle, it will automatically repair itself when the monster next leaves the area. This doesn't just make getting around environments easier, it also makes giving chase to monsters more epic. When a monster flees in Monster Hunter, they're gone. This is your chance to med up, sharpen your weapons, and kind of mosey on down to the next arena. But when a monster in Wild Heart starts to flee, you're like, oh no you don't, and you're riding zip lines and gliding off cliffs, keeping them firmly in your sights, never giving them a moment to breathe. It is cinematic, it is epic, and when it all lines up, giving chase to a fleeing monster can be almost as fun as fighting them. While we're on the topic of environments, I have to say they're excellent. There's a lot more geometry and verticality at play, but the biggest differentiator is how much they embrace the built environment. This is not just jungle or volcanic waste or Arctic tundra. These environments have houses, villages, temples, shipwrecked ships. You will find bosses on the roofs of giant buildings or on bridges or inside dojos. These more varied level designs deepen combat further, as ranged weapons in particular become more powerful if you can find yourself a nice safe spot to perch while the monster thrashes about below. Coming back to Karakori, we've spoken about its impact on the story, on exploration and on pursuit, but the real genius of the system is how much it transforms combat. Karakori system is not just about building permanent structures, it's also about building these temporary structures that you use during combat to avoid damage, deal damage, stun enemies, apply status effects, and a host of other things. Holding the left shoulder button brings up the build menu, and with another single button press, you will instantaneously conjure a Karakori, a box you can leap from, for example, or a spring to dash you forward, or a glider to get you airborne in a pinch. These things are not just stuff you use on occasion, by the way, they are baked into the very core of the combat kit. Very often, you'll need to use the spring just to create enough distance because your dodge or slide isn't going to get the job done, so you'll instinctively start folding this into your moveset after some practice. The boxes are a great example. If you build 3 of them really quickly, they'll stack on top of each other, and if you press towards it, your character will quickly clamber up, and then you can jump off to do some really powerful aerial attacks. So this is all awesome, I love it, but it gets even better. Later on, you'll unlock what are called Fusion Karakori, and the way you do this is so rad. You'll get this like flash of inspiration when fighting certain monsters, and then some button prompts will pop up showing you how to build this entirely new thing. In this instance, I was being shown how to build the bulwark. By combining 6 boxes together, they would magically transform to create a reinforced wall, and when the monster charges, he is going to KO himself, which is exactly what he did. But there are other examples of this too. When fighting flying enemies, you can summon fireworks cannon that will dazzle your foe and bring them low.
See how you like this?
Personal favorite is the Pounder, which is just a big ass hammer that you build next to a monster, and if they happen to be in the way when that hammer comes down, well, that's on them.
It's complete. How about this?
There are so many Karakori and Fusion Karakori available, like one that's a sort of grapple, and there's another one that functions very similar to the wire bug from Monster Hunter Rise. There are cannons you can build, there are lanterns that will set your weapon on fire, there's tons and tons, and they each earn their own place in their own way. The brilliance of them though, is that they make combat deeper and more strategic, but also faster. If this system had been slow and laborious to build stuff, combat might have been more strategic, but it would have been less exciting. If this system had been more one note, it might have ended up more like Monster Hunter Rise's wire bug, which doesn't really deepen combat, it kind of just feels like a bit of an I win button. The expansiveness of this system, the rapid deployments, and the ability to hard counter monsters with Fusion Karakori is such a brilliant cocktail, and this is the part of the game that really made me fall in love with this package. One thing that I'm a little more on the fence about is enemy design. Aesthetically, I like them, but they certainly lack the distinctiveness of Monster Hunter monsters, or just video game monsters in general. Wild Heart's kimono are like, what if pig, but kind of bigger and fucked up? What if chicken, if kind of bigger and fucked up? The designs do feel grounded, more connected to a theme rather than just a hodgepodge of random assorted enemy types, but they also feel a little safe. More of an issue though are the attack patterns and openings for these enemies. This game is properly hard. Having finished both Monster Hunter World and Rise, I can confidently say that this is much tougher, at least during the campaign, as I haven't properly explored the endgame yet. Enemies are so ferocious, so relentless, so many devastating attacks at any range, and tons of AoE attacks that are very difficult to avoid. I will admit that I did find it a bit much at times. There's a balance to be struck between truly fearsome monsters that feel alive and video game bosses who telegraph attacks and provide openings for you to attack them. I'm not fully convinced that Wild Hearts has got that balance right, and some encounters can feel extremely oppressive, drawing out hunts in ways that doesn't feel fun or satisfying. Having said that, Wild Hearts did give me the challenge that Monster Hunter Rise didn't. Success here is very hard earned, and when you can pull it off, it does feel fantastic. It's just that, yeah, you're gonna get carded a hell of a lot more than you'd expect, so do be ready for that. There's something similar to be said of the materials grind for new weapons and armor. I've definitely found progress through the weapon tree to be much slower here than in Monster Hunter games. Some of the material bottlenecks are pretty brutal, requiring me to farm enemies even in the early game, as drops are surprisingly skint. It's not a huge problem, but if you were hoping that Wild Hearts might take the edge off that grind and provide some smoother progression, you are in for a rude shock. Finally, itemization isn't exactly setting my world on fire. Weapons and armor sets all look fantastic, but the stat increases are very minor up until you get to the later game. That's fine for anyone willing to stick with this game in the longer term, but those just looking for a campaign experience are going to be pretty underwhelmed by how little agency they have over their build. Those are some of my complaints, and I have a few others, but they're pretty minor. My overall takeaway from this isn't the minor gripes, it's genuine surprise that Omega managed to pull this off and deliver a genuine evolution of the monster hunting formula, to the point where I'm gonna miss a lot of this stuff when I go back to Monster Hunter World later this year, if the rumors of a new Monster Hunter game are true, which they almost certainly are. I mean, take matchmaking for example. That's generally pretty shitty in Monster Hunter games. Capcom go out of their way to make it sort of hard to group up, but here in Hearts, it's just a single button press to join an in-progress hunt for a monster you're chasing, or you can immediately start your own public hunt and you'll have people joining you in no time. Totally seamless. It's absolutely how we've always wanted it to be, and Wild Hearts have done it. The other thing is the soundtrack. God damn, I wish I could spend more time talking about this, but it is absolutely brilliant, and it's so epic, and it elevates every fight. I love it. All of these new ideas, all of this promise, it's just such a shame that this looks and runs so badly. So bad that I just can't recommend picking it up now. Some people are having a fine time with it, but if you look around on Twitter or Reddit or elsewhere, you will see scores of people complaining about how rough this is. There is a day one patch planned which could change things. There is a fix for this CPU bug coming at some point. There is the promise of DLSS and FSR in the future, but it's that old thing where it's like, well, you've had 5 years to make a game, and we're supposed to believe that all of its problems get fixed in 5 days? It does happen, but it's rare, and for now, I'd recommend putting this on your backlog list. Keeping an eye on it, checking in a few weeks or months to see what the word on performance is, and if you get the all clear, then you should absolutely grab this, because this is a great video game that has earned a spot at the monster hunting table in one fell swoop, an achievement that I don't think anyone would have expected. I look forward to the day when I can enthusiastically recommend Wild Hearts, but sadly, it is not this day. So Eureka Ergonomics emailed me and they're like, hey dude, would you like a standing desk? And I'm like, listen, I already have a standing desk. I'm all about that standing desk life because I sit in front of a computer screen for like 15 hours a day, and if I didn't regularly stand up, my back would end up looking like curly fries and would be just as crunchy. So I says to Eureka, you know who doesn't have a standing desk? My editor, Austin. He also spends an inordinate amount of time in front of a screen, and my boy deserves to stand up whenever he damn well pleases. So how about we send the desk to Austin instead? And Eureka were more than happy to oblige, and now Austin is the proud owner of a brand new premium Aero standing desk. This thing is like the Cadillac of standing desks. The wing-shaped design provides a surrounding environment that is perfect for ease of access to your devices and ergonomic view for multiple monitors, while creating a uniquely visual style for your workplace. It also has all the bells and whistles, including shelves you can adjust to different positions, holsters for your mobile devices, headphones, cup holders, and a tray for your keyboard and mouse, not to mention a very stealthy cable management system for a super clean look. The Aero standing desk uses a premium dual motor system, which uses new technology to balance the amount of weight needed to raise and lower the desk, resulting in quieter operation and improved motor lifespan. Austin is rocking the walnut finish, but if you're looking for something a little more gamery, there's also a carbon fiber finish. Plus, there's a non-standing version available as well if you're looking for a top quality desk at a lower price. Best of all, it comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you're all dissatisfied with it, you just reach out to Eureka and you get your money back. Easy. To grab one for yourself, click the link below, and when it's time to check out, just use offer code SKILLUP for a 10% discount off your purchase. That's offer code SKILLUP after you click that link below in the description or the pinned comment. Thanks Eureka Ergonomic for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.